Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today I am building some wands. Surprisingly enough, I don't think I've made any on the channel, and it's something that a beginner could get their hands on and do within a matter of a couple of hours, depending on the material that you use. Now, if you use the correct material, it shouldn't be too difficult. If you pick the wrong ones, it might not be as easy. So I, of course, am going to pick the wrong ones. I got some hardwood and just liked the way that the wood grain looked and thought, ooh, this is gonna be great. You'll see why not so great here in a minute. And I also got some resin pen blanks that I'm going to use for at least one of them, along with thermoplastic, and of course I got to throw in some variety there. So today we are making magic wands. Hopefully they turn out okay. Let's get to building. So this is desert ironwood. Of the 73,000 different species of trees on Earth, it is ranked in the top 10 of densest woods on the planet. Generally too small to be viable for timber, it's more popular with hobbyists for small projects, although this stuff is ridiculously hard. The wood grain color differences can be from almost black to very light tan with some hints of red in there also. I tried my best to carve it by hand and quickly realized there is no way that I'll be able to. My carving knife is very sharp and I can barely pull the knife scratching through this surface. I went outside and threw it down on the concrete to see if it would do anything to it, and it did not put a dent in it. These pieces that I bought off of Amazon are sold as pen blanks, so we shall see how this build goes. My goal is to turn the rectangular prism into an octagonal prism and then carve a spiral into it. I might have taken it to the belt sander outside and aggressively sanded it with 120 grit sandpaper. It took quite a while, and this wood smells more like horn when carved than wood. I was proud of my shavings that I did get by hand before giving up and using a power tool, which was still a lot of work. I measured out every inch and then used electrical tape to help me get closer to an even-ish spiral. I marked it with my whittling knife and switched over to a rotary tool in a minute. This build was inspired by my assistant principal. This week was assistant principal appreciation week, and as a huge Harry Potter fan, I wanted to make her a custom wand for her office. I did make her a custom fancy stand to go with this, but I wanted to keep it personal just for her. So sorry, there is a stand, but you don't get to see it. So at this point, I am several hours in, my hands are tired, and I am finally switching to a rotary tool. I tried to catch a little bit of it on camera for the video and really had a hard time finding a good angle to carve. I probably need a vise or some kind of clamp, but ended up just using grip strength to shape the handle. Something else you may not think about when you're watching a video like this, especially at this angle that I currently have set up, is the camera is between my face and the object, partially obscuring my view. So after a short clip of the struggle, I switched to this position with the part resting on my chest to get an up-close view and try and keep things even. I probably should be wearing a mask, but definitely I am wearing eye protection. The metal rotary bit I am using actually was blunted down to almost smooth by the time I finished carving the 3 handles. Yes, I'm making 3 in case you missed the thumbnail. So after I got the basic shape I wanted, I moved on to sanding, and boy did I sand a lot. Being new to the hobby woodworking, I don't quite have all the tools that I need to do this stuff with properly. After the hours of sanding from 120 up to about 600 on this wood, I went online and bought a small cheap mini pen lathe, a set of files and wood rasps, and some bulk amounts of sandpaper that luckily arrived before I finished this video. As laborious as all of this seems, I'm really enjoying diving into more traditional materials. I don't necessarily have a solidified idea of what I want at this point, so I'm just gonna kind of go with the flow. Even though this wood is an absolute pain to carve in, it's some of the most beautiful wood that I've ever seen. The color variations and the wood grain patterns will overshadow any feeble attempt that I may have to try and carve something interesting. By default, it wins. With the other wands, I pretty much use similar concepts with just a different variation of the patterns that I carved into the ironwood. I didn't want to repeat those same things over in this video and make it like triple the length, so I'm just going to kind of show some quick little bits here. Trust me when I say this was about a 2-week process of shaping, carving, and sanding each of these things down. I also bought some resin pen blanks for one of the wands, the orange wand that I'm making for my AP. I carved it in a similar fashion and had to add a middle section to them because the blanks were only 5 inches tall. It was at this point that I decided to try and make different techniques for all the wands that I had. So the handle would be made of the ironwood and the tips would be made out of different materials. I'm not sure which method will be the best, but I am at least gaining experience with the different approaches to the same task. It just goes to show you that there are tons of ways that you can do a similar job. From this point out, I'm going to be jumping between different wands, and I don't want to have any confusion with the continuity because you'll see some finished parts in clips if I didn't and just did all of one wand at one chunk. So one of my wand tip options was going to be some thermoplastic. You heat up some water, drop in some pellets, and then mold it into an interesting shape as it cools. I'm sure people out there have tried this before, but I have not. I'm going to tint these pellets with mica powder. I did a test run in a bright blue, and with enough of the powder you can get a pretty bright finish. I decided to try 2 different colors swirled, then added some embellishments after it cooled, so it's gonna change in shape quite a bit. Of the 3, it ended up being my least favorite, but by far was the quickest to shape. Literally in just a couple of minutes, I had an intricate shape with vibrant colors, and I didn't have to sand it. Back to the first wand, which now has the resin bit shaped and sanded at 120 grit at this point. My traditional sandpapers go up to about 600 here, and then I did a micro mesh sanding, which I believe is on its own scale from 1500 grit to 12,000 grit. You could do wet sanding with this if you wanted, but I did not. For those of you not familiar with the sanding process on wood or resin or any other material for that matter, the grit will level off the high points of your surface as you scrape it across. Once fully covered, you move up to a finer grit to remove the scratches of the previous grit. Literally scratches, removing scratches until they get so small that you can no longer see or fill them with the naked eye. With the resin, I use the micro mesh all the way up to the 12,000 grit, and the surface looks like it has a polishing compound added to it, but it doesn't. Smoothest thing I have ever done by hand, and I'm extremely proud of how it looks, but man, this took forever. This was like 3 or 4 hours worth of sanding. Spread out across my table, I am going to try 3 different joint methods. The one on the far left is just made of wood, so it seemed only right to use wood dowels to join it. The tip and the pommel of this one was made out of some scrap pieces of 2x4 lumber from a house project I did a while back. I drilled holes in each part and added wood glue to the surface, the hole, and the dowel, and then just pushed the bits together. You can use painter's tape to get enough clamping power to hold the parts together while the wood glue dries, which takes a couple of hours. For the thermoplastic layer, I drilled some holes in the wood at a slight angle away from each other and put some of the thermoplastic in the holes. Then I heated up my tip and pushed it down onto the plastic plugs. I added a small glob of CA glue to kind of help with the bonding. I'm not sure of the durability of either of these wands, but as a wand is generally used not as a melee weapon for physical damage, it should stand up to a dropping during normal cosplay / goofing around. For the fancier of the 3, I went ahead and carved out a recess in the wood parts to accept the orange resin. Each was shaped to make a snug fit and took a while to get it just right. My thought process was that it would increase the surface area that was coming into contact with the 5-minute epoxy instead of it just being a weak butt joint. But once again, this could be overkill, as I'm sure this wand will spend a majority of its time on the stand displayed in an office. I put a tiny glob of epoxy in each of the recesses, fit its corresponding parts in, and then stacked it up to dry. I used 1, 2, 3 blocks to keep it in the upright position. It's kinda hard to believe looking at these wands in their current state that I have put no type of wood conditioning or wax on them. This is their natural state, just sanded. I'm going to add some citrus infused mineral oil intended for cutting boards to bring out the luster in the wood. You can do several layers of this stuff if you need to and let it seep into the wood grain for a while before adding the wax. I use the same process on my carved wood spoon build that if you didn't watch, you should definitely go back and check out. I saturated all 3 handles and left them for several hours. The mineral oil and this wax are all natural products and are food grade safe. Once again, probably not necessary for the application that I'm using it for here, but it just kind of feels nice to use some natural finishing processes. You coat on this wax, let it sit for 20 or 30 minutes, and then buff out the excess on the wood. This is my assistant principal, Mrs. Huddleston, which will be taking over as my head principal next year. She will be my 6th principal in 17 years at the same school that I've taught at, and hopefully she will be my last principal. She graduated, taught, and now is the leader of our campus. I did not have the pleasure of teaching her, I just barely missed that opportunity, but I have seen her grow as an educator, and I could not ask for a better wizard to guide all of us muggles into an ever-changing field of education. I'm pretty sure her smile speaks to how happy she was when she got this gift. A small token of respect to a truly awesome person that I am blessed to work alongside every day. And we are finished. Here is the end result. Overall, I think they turned out pretty cool. Definitely my favorite of the 3. The resin was no joke to try and polish to a shine by using sanding paper. Not necessarily a method I would recommend unless you like sanding for hours upon hours, but the end result does look pretty impeccable. Maybe you will try and make some of these yourselves and impress your friends with their ability to make some magic with some materials that hopefully will not turn you into a frog. Maybe. Maybe you'll get some. Yay! And inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? Can you give them one of these? Tell them, much props. I think all I got to do is like wave it and say like, hocus pocus, or I don't know. I'm sure it'll come to me. If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and you would like to see more builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.